Today on Landline, new varieties to tempt us to return to eating an apple a day.
There's 21 new apple varieties that are about to hit the market over the next 3 to 5 years. It's going to change the game on apples for consumers in Australia.
Exporting Australian lamb to India, the most vegetarian country in the world.
You don't need too much spices. The meat itself is beautiful, it speaks for itself.
And how the ocean's great escape artists star in our fastest growing commercial fishery.
This is what we're looking for. He's a premium grade octopus. All his tentacles are intact. They're a good size for chefs, restaurants.
Hello, I'm Pip Courtney. Welcome to the program. Apples used to be our go-to fruit, but due to stiff competition from other fruits, we don't eat as many as we used to. So the industry is evolving, investing big in bringing new varieties to Australian households. Here's Landline's Tim Lee.
The old adage about apples keeping the doctor away still rings true. But Australians are eating fewer apples than they used to.
It is a super concentrated space at the moment, apples, and we're losing customers to other categories.
You walk into a greengrocer or a supermarket and go to the fresh produce space and you can see, there's multiple types of berry now, there's various types of citrus, there's multiple types of grapes, the list goes on. So what used to be a pretty uncompetitive space where apples and pears had a good period of the year to themselves, now it's there's a plentiful supply of all those different types of fruits and snack items all year round. So, we've got to compete now.
I think the apple industry is at a critical juncture, not only in Australia but around the world. We've seen costs increase, certainly post-COVID, by over 20%. The price we're getting for apples today on most of our apples is the same as what it was 10 years ago. So how do you have 10% increase in cost but same revenue?
So the apple industry needs to keep up and we need to offer a better product to the consumer.
And that's exactly what's happening. Consumers are about to see an exciting array of new apple varieties.
There's 21 new apple varieties that are about to hit the market over the next 3 to 5 years.
And this one will be on the shelves in coming weeks.
Cosmic Crisp is a new apple, so it's a cross between a Honeycrisp and an Enterprise. It was developed over 20 years at the Washington State University, and we're bringing it to consumers here in Australia, and it is going to change the game on apples for consumers in Australia.
Matt Palisi has good reason to be upbeat about this apple. He and his company, Red Rich Fruits, scoured the globe for a variety that could avoid some age-old problems.
Cosmic Crisp is going to reinvigorate the category because it's going to be the most consistent apple on the shelf, the best quality and the best for consumers, while it's grower friendly for growers like ourselves.
So, Matt, these are the first of the Cosmic Crisps planted in Australia?
They are. So planted in 2021 on our cold stream orchards here in Victoria. The tree's performing very, very well. The yield's been good so far. The quality looks very good. We're very excited about bringing Cosmic Crisp to the consumers in Australia.
And we'll see a lot more of these trees across the Australian landscape.
We will. So there'll be 560,000 trees planted across Australia. We've decided to keep it into cool climate regions, so we're in Manjimup, WA, Batlow in New South Wales, and here in the Yarra Valley in Victoria, because that'll create the closest conditions we can to the Washington State, so we can deliver that great experience to the customers. We've got 13 growers growing it, including ourselves, so that's 14 in total, and we've limited that to make sure that every apple is the most consistent product on the shelf.
It's hoped the Aussie version will be just as flavoursome.
So we're classified as a cool climate region. So we get the chill hours that we need in the winter for the trees to do their thing when in their dormancy. And then we get really good weather during the growing season. We get enough rainfall and the cooler weather is just perfect for apples.
This variety was launched in the USA in 2020 and it's skyrocketed to become one of the nation's best-selling apples. There are hopes it will enjoy similar success here.
We've been looking at apple varieties since the early 2000s. We found Cosmic Crisp in around 2012, 2014 and watched what it was doing in the US, and we were awarded their rights in 2019 for Australia, but didn't plant our first tree until 2021. And now we're sitting here in the orchard, which we just had our first harvest, which is 2024, and will be full producing in 2029. So it's a 10-year journey from when we found the variety to when it's at home with the consumer.
This vibrant red apple is so named because its dapples resemble stars in the cosmos. There's a common goal across Australia's apple industry, maximising the potential of new apple varieties and getting consumers excited about them. On Melbourne's eastern outskirts, one of the nation's largest fruit companies processes and packs produce 52 weeks of the year. The Montague Fresh facility at Narre Warren opened in 2020, a massive $66 million investment and a bold bid by the company to ensure its future viability.
It's all about automation. It's how do you do things more efficiently, and that comes with scale.
Surrounding the complex is 50 hectares of orchard, netted to protect it from birds and extreme weather. It's a far cry from when the business was started by Bill Montague in 1948. This is Bill a few years back. He died recently, aged 97.
In 1950-something, he took up growing apples on this site here. Someone suggested to him apples might be a good idea, so he did that, and then, you know, the business has grown through 3 generations, and today, you know, this is our main site, and we've got 500 hectares of fruit around the country.
Inside the state-of-the-art packhouse, robotics have brought a fail-proof efficiency to an industry that's still heavily reliant on manual labour. The giant cold store can hold up to 3,200 kilogram crates of fruit stored on vertical racks. The robot technology can identify, locate and move any one crate it's directed to, and then send it smoothly onto the packing line. For several decades, Montague Fresh has also been at the forefront of the rollout and production of new apple varieties.
We introduced Jazz was our first one, and now, you know, we've pretty much every other year we've been tinkering with introducing things.
The most impressive, both in appearance and taste, is this one, derived after decades of development from a red-fleshed crabapple.
So Rowan, these are some of the new varieties. Just run us through them.
Yeah, so this is Ambrosia, which is probably the newest traditional variety. Comes from Canada, very light texture, very sweet, almost no acidity. So when you eat that, it's just a really nice, sweet apple. And then look, this is our Kisabel Summer. It's yellow on the outside, but then eventually it'll go orange on the skin. And when you cut it, you get this amazing pink colour. And then that is Kisabel Berry, which is a full red, like a cherry colour. And then when you cut it, you get that deep red flesh. Kisabel Berry is like, I would call it the full flavour. You know, it's that really deep raspberry, very strong acidity, but sweet still, really complex.
It's quite stunning.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So Rowan, this is a red-leafed variety of apple. Just explain.
Yeah, look, this is an amazing experiment that we're doing here. So you can see this is a traditional apple leaf. You can see the green stem and the green leaf on this one. And then this is the red stem and the red leaf. And the really interesting thing for us is going to be what impact does this colour have on fruit. What we're really looking for is a solid red-fleshed apple. I mean, red flesh has been a bit of a nirvana for the breeding community. I think a lot of them did it just for fun.
The early types were too astringent, but 20 years on, the red-fleshed apples are now available here. Started by Italian migrants post-World War II, Red Rich Fruits is also a family business.
Our family started farming in the Yarra Valley in 1948, so coming on 76 years now. And we're really proud to be Australian-owned, family-run. I'm the 3rd generation now coming through. We've got myself and my brother and 2 cousins, so the 4 of us are the 3rd generation coming through now. And yeah, we're really proud of what we've done and what we're doing in the future.
Well, recently, the company has diversified and expanded rapidly to other regions of Australia.
We've expanded our business since 2010, so we've become one of Australia's largest vertically integrated fruit and vegetable marketers and growers, and now we have a diversified portfolio of farms. Mangoes in the Northern Territory, citrus through Gayndah in Queensland, and then stone fruit, wine grapes, and apples and pears here in the Yarra Valley, and market for 90 odd growers across the country through our distribution and marketing network.
I reckon we cut this beautiful one open. Yeah, let's see how crispy it is.
One of the crucial qualities that Red Rich Fruits was seeking was an apple with a long shelf life that stayed fresh after cutting, which the Cosmic Crisp delivers on.
It's crisp, it's tangy, it's crunchy, and it's got a great shelf life. And the best part about it for mums at home is it doesn't brown.
According to ABS data, more than 90% of Australians don't eat enough fruit and vegetables.
The real challenge is how do we actively engage with the next generation of consumers and get them excited about flavours, textures, uses, whatever in the apple game. That's the big challenge.
These exciting new branded apple varieties are more costly to produce. The growers pay a royalty to the plant breeders, for example, so they'll be a little dearer in the shops. But the apple industry, backed by a major advertising campaign in coming weeks, believes the results will be seen at the checkout and may even boost apple exports, currently only 1% of the annual crop.
There is the opportunity. They tend to be more of a premium price, and so that allows Australia to re-enter the market because we can justify a higher cost.
As a business, we've gone all in. This is going to be the star for us. We're going to market it better than anyone else has, and every consumer at home is going to get an experience they've never had in apples.
There's so many new apple varieties coming on board that there's not a dull moment. Any shelf in the country and you'll find something exciting, and we think the Cosmic is going to stand out on that shelf, so yeah, we're really excited.
Australia's broad-scale cropping industry doesn't have a commercial spice sector. Most of what we use to enhance our cooking is imported. Sesame is just one of several crops being trialled in Northern Australia to change that. Rockhampton-based reporter Megan Hughes takes a look at an emerging industry.
This unassuming flower growing on a farm in central Queensland could bloom into a new agricultural industry. It's sesame, and these trial rows have been planted to help create a spice sector in Northern Australia.
It's just so exciting. It's so exciting to see a new opportunity, particularly for growers in the north. People are always looking for something new to try, and we won't know if it works until we've had a really good go at trialling everything, but the early signs are really promising.
4 years ago, a research team from CQ University, led by Tineke Trotter, planted several crops new to Australia, before narrowing it down to the best performers, black and white sesame, fennel and kalonji. They planted on farms throughout Queensland, the Northern Territory and Western Australia. Aaron Kiley's farm at Emerald in Queensland is the most southern, with the sesame planted among fields of cotton.
Sesame is really well suited to here, so it likes the really hot environments. It thrives in quite hot environments. It can also thrive quite well on low moisture. So as long as we've got moisture at key times, and that's really around crop establishment, but it's also around grain filling, so that seed filling time, we tend to be able to achieve reasonable yields.
Sesame has a reputation for being a labour-intensive crop, as wild shattering varieties are generally hand-harvested.
So a shattering sesame line is one that when it matures, the pods open and it releases the seed. So that's more of a wild type and a potentially an older type of genetic where the plant was less about cropping and more about surviving in an environment. The non-shattering lines are lines that have been selected over time to help them to be able to be harvested more easily. So So a shattering line, when a harvester hits it, even if you are going at a slow pace, with all the settings right and potentially even with blowers trying to blow seed in, it can create significant losses.
Trials started with shattering sesame, but now the team has non-shattering lines, developed overseas and licensed in Australia by seed company Agriventus Technologies.
So we now have non-shattering varieties, and the genetics we've got now, there's over 12 different varieties we've now brought into Australia, and we're doing all the trials and testing throughout the whole of North Australia.
The comparative ease of harvesting was demonstrated at a recent field day. Pests and wet weather hampered the first few sesame harvests, but perseverance has paid off, with enough data being collated to soon share with growers interested in planting the crop.
We are starting to get our heads around when to plant the crop, how to manage it in season, what the planting depths and densities should be.
For growers like Aaron Kiley, he needs to know how it could complement his other crops.
There's a great group working together, so it's just seeing where these yields can be, how many hectares we would require, and see if it fits into our farming system, to benefit the region.
But he does think sesame is worth considering.
I think it'd be more your rotation crop. You'd fit it into your system and see what the benefits are going forward. Yeah, unless there is a great market for it that could move in, say, to the inland port, or could be exported out of this region, or based throughout Australia.
The quality of the crop is being examined in the lab.
What we're doing here is we're passing the biomass product into the thresher, and the seed will come out of the pods and separate the pods and the seed.
So we're at the next stage, which is cleaning. So what happens here?
This is the next step in the process that you'd find in any harvester. The seed will travel through a number of different sieves. Some of the particles, the larger particles, will drop lower, the heavier biomass particles. The dust gets blown out with the fans, and we end up with a much cleaner seed sample at the end. We turn the seed into oil so that we can assess some of the different qualities of the seed. We would like to understand how the seed is performing in the different geographical areas across Australia. And we also like to be able to understand which are the best varieties to be growing in different areas.
And what qualities are you looking for?
So there's a few qualities that we test for in the lab. With the whole seed, we're looking at the size of the seed, how much oil is in each seed, so the percentage of oil content. We look at the moisture content of the seed as well. And then we assess for things like the colour, and we select different varieties based on their visual appearance as well.
With no commercial quantities of Australian-grown sesame, bakeries rely on imported product. That could change as soon as next year, with small volumes of local commercial seed becoming available. It's predicted to cost around $2,400 a tonne, the same price as premium imported sesame.
And we've obviously had looking at developing the market first, so we have to have a market to sell into, and that's what we're developing over the next 12 months. Is a local market first, because we import 100% of sesame. So we want to basically target that market first. It's about $8 million to $10 million market in Australia, and then look at the export market the year after. So a lot of the market currently is with sesame oil and also confectionery, companies that use sesame in the confectionery, bakery markets for the bread and rolls and pastries. But there's also nutraceutical industries and pharmaceutical industries that use sesame and sesame oils.
Back in the field, trials in the Northern Territory are in their second year, but convincing growers to plant sesame crops there could be a hurdle.
We do have a lot of wild sesame that was potentially brought over earlier on and has now kind of gone a bit crazy, and there's a stigma around it being a weed, and I think that's just simply because it's a shattering line of sesames. It is a very interesting crop, and I think the more we get into it, the more we look at it and see where we can diversify it a little bit into our normal crops up in the NT. We predominantly do hay and cotton at the moment, so seeing where it kind of fits in with everything will be really interesting as well.
Research and Development Corporation AgriFutures is working to expand the number of sesame trial sites.
Just run your fingers.
Not quite to Victoria, but certainly northern New South Wales and some southern New South Wales. It really likes the hot, dry climate, and that's where in Queensland can be grown over summer, such as in central Queensland, and even grown over winter where it's still warm enough and dry season to grow in northern Queensland.
While Australian-grown sesame may be ready for the domestic market as early as 2025, there's still more work to be done in the lab and at trial sites before it can reach full-scale commercial production.
I think like any crop, there's always something more to learn and to help and to develop and assist growers, and that's what's really exciting about being able to be part of an emerging industry research program, the Port. So we hope that as we find new challenges that we can be involved in helping to solve those problems for the sesame industry and for other emerging spice industries as well.
Hi, I'm Kath Sullivan. There are renewed hopes Australia's trade war with China is nearing its end, with Beijing lifting import bans on 5 meatworks. Kilcoy Pastoral, JBS at Dinmore and Beef City and Merrimist in Queensland, as well as the Casino Food Co-op in northern New South Wales, had been locked out of China since 2020. While Beijing claimed the meat bans were due to technical reasons, it was widely believed to be an act of political retribution.
That is fantastic news for Australia's cattle producers, for our meat processing industry, for the workers in those industries, and of course for Australian exports.
We did the hard yards on this when we were in government. The Albanese Labor government continued that approach, and it's bore dividends to our exporters, which is welcome news.
They're major processing plants in Australia. They support the China market with incredible volume up until 2020. And it's just great to see them back with a chance to supply again.
Queensland abattoirs, John D and Australian Country Choice remain suspended. And while barley, coal and wine trades have resumed exports to China, Australia's lobster industry hasn't traded there since 2020. Carbon capture and storage will be banned throughout the Great Artesian Basin in Queensland under new state laws. The Queensland Government recently blocked a plan by mining giant Glencore to pump more than 300,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide into the Gab.
The Great Artesian Basin is just too important to Queensland to mess with, and that's why I'm announcing today that we will ban CCS in the Great Artesian Basin.
We look forward to the rest of Australia looking to this leadership that you've seen here in Queensland and doing similar to implement a federal moratorium.
The Queensland Premier says carbon capture and storage will still be allowed in other parts of the state, subject to existing approval processes. The new laws are expected to be introduced and passed by the Queensland Parliament before the state election in October. Farmers have rallied against the federal government's decision to ban live sheep exports by sea. Truckloads of farmers converged on Perth from across the state, calling for the ban to be overturned. The protest came as laws to phase out the trade by May 2028 were introduced in the federal parliament. The RSPCA has released an analysis of more than 50 live sheep voyages, which it says show more than 60% of observer reports found clear indications of heat stress in animals on board. The long-running live cattle export class action appears set to be resolved in court, with the federal government and cattle producers locked in a stalemate over compensation. In 2020, cattle exporters won a class action in the federal court, which found the former Labor government's 2011 decision to ban live exports to Indonesia was unlawful. The Albanese government has offered $215 million to settle the case, but the claimants are demanding closer to $800 million.
I don't think I'm telling any secrets by saying that when these cases start, claimants generally go in with a bit of ambit on their claim. So just because they say it's worth that much doesn't mean it is. What we've got to do is work out a fair and reasonable amount of taxpayers' money to devote.
The case has been listed for a hearing in April next year. And Australia's last remaining single desk looks set to end. For more than a century, Australian-grown rice has been pulled and sold to overseas markets by one company, now known as Sunrice. The New South Wales government intends to introduce new laws that would end the monopoly, known as vesting, from July next year. And that's Landline News.
With live sheep exports to be phased out, sheep meat producers will be looking for other markets. A new trade agreement with India has made exporting there more attractive, and Australian producers aren't put off by the country's high rates of vegetarianism. Here's Landline's Christy O'Brien.
Life moves at a slow and traditional pace in a rural village in Uttar Pradesh, about 650 kilometres from New Delhi. Even right alongside a bustling freeway, India's farmers use every bit of land available to grow food. Be it a backyard buffalo pen or narrow allotment, agriculture is the lifeblood of millions in India. From the brightly clad women tending the fields or a lone shepherd leading his flock, the land has sustained their families for generations. India isn't short on volume when it comes to livestock, which the national census puts at around 74 million animals. With high rates of vegetarianism, not all are destined for the table, but that's changing.
Look at that, that's perfectly cooked. It's so nicely cooked, it's so tender, and the spice is complementing the lamb.
As general wealth has increased, so too has the appetite for meat. Restaurateurs have noticed falling vegetarianism, with younger people less wedded to traditional food and increasingly influenced by movies and social media in their eating aspirations.
And there's just so much more exposure, whether it's through personal travel, whether it's through TV, the number of cooking shows out there. So there's just so much exposure to food from all over the country, all over the world, and there's this curiosity to try it.
Indian consumption patterns are changing. Eating out is in.
It used to be a special occasion kind of thing, going out to eat. Today, people eat 3-4 times a week, whether it's for a drink, whether it's a whole meal.
Will Agajanan is working the kitchen at the table in Mumbai, deemed one of the top restaurants globally.
This is a lamb shank, just braised pretty simply, like red wine, vegetables, tomatoes. Risotto Milanese, which has Kashmiri saffron, so saffron from India, but done that way.
The owners have been pioneers in fine dining. Returning to India in 2007, after years working abroad, they saw a glaring gap in the market.
15 years ago, there were very few standalone restaurants. Most of the good food was relegated to the 5-star hotels.
Along with refined taste, their clientele are discerning not just about the quality of their food, but the origin as well. And in good news for sheep producers, the appetite for Australian lamb is growing.
Lamb's definitely the big meat seller here. And I think they definitely consider Australian lamb a higher class lamb, maybe because it's imported, but also because they know the quality is consistent. They have it.
While there is a shift towards eating local foods for sustainability purposes, if the quality is missing, imported options will always be the first choice.
You can't sort of pull the wool over their eyes.
Quality
anymore.
in the choices.
Yeah.
They're looking for the choices. They're looking for the quality.
And they're willing to pay, I think, a premium if they get value.
One company keen to supply that growing demand for quality sheep meat is Fletcher's, one of Australia's biggest meat exporters, based in Dubbo in northwestern New South Wales. Roger Fletcher has decades of experience exporting meat and other commodities around the world and was one of the first Australian exporters into India. He says lessons can be drawn from other markets and flexibility is paramount to give customers what they want.
We can't change their culture. We've got to work with them and have the products that suits them. India is not just India. India is probably 4 or 5 countries, and we understand that in most cultures.
Just a small portion of the Indian market would be very valuable. Meat and Livestock Australia forecast India will consume more than 2.8 million tonnes of sheep meat by 2026. That would be worth $76 billion. MLA recognises that big improvements in cold storage, logistics and transport are necessary to realise those numbers.
India is made up of basically 50% of farmers. So they're used to having fresh product in day to day. No different to China. China was the same and it's slowly changed, and we see India going down that road. But it's going to be build the foundations and get from there.
Heavy lifting for everyone involved.
The airports are congested. Mumbai, and that's congested. We've got an opportunity, we've got to grab them, and it's really up to the companies and the processors right through to deliver that.
Roger Fletcher is playing the long game. He concedes it'll be around 3 years before Australia is getting big volumes of sheep meat into the subcontinent. But it will be worth it.
India's changed dramatically in the last 10 years, and their middle class is growing at equivalent of our population a year. So there is a market there. Admittedly, the large population is Hindu and a lot of them don't eat meat, but that's changing too.
Are you excited about tomato? That meeting was good, yeah.
Fletcher's global sales manager, Sam White, has been to India 8 times to get across the enormous scale of the market and to see how India likes to eat lamb.
It's awesome to see the product being used in a variety of different ways that we wouldn't do ourselves. They use a lot of spice, a lot of flavour, they cook it differently, and the end result is fantastic.
This trip he's attending the International Food and Hospitality Fair in Delhi, a 5-day event that gives insight into competitors and customers.
This event's a fantastic opportunity for us to connect with the end user, the consumer, get a deeper understanding of the market.
Australia now has a competitive tariff-free edge over New Zealand, India's other main source of imported sheep meat. But Australia's Trade and Investment Commissioner says we can't afford to be complacent.
We have the strategic advantage at the moment. We're the first developed country India's signed a trade agreement with for the last decade.
Part of his remit is connecting business between the two countries and building long-term relationships.
Welcome to Taste the Wonders of Australia. Australia showcase of food, wine and good company.
It's just so important to select the right partner, but also form a relationship with that partner, because ultimately being able to market our products with them actually helps to grow their business as well. It's not just simply a zero-sum game of export our stuff and forget about it. Just probably also noting that what we do incredibly well is actually discover how our products fit within the Indian cuisine.
That's where local chefs come in to show consumers how to use more meat in cooking.
It's a beautiful lamb. Also, it cooks so fast that it doesn't take that much of time. And the skill set required is much lesser. So if you teach somebody how to grill the meat and rest it, it doesn't need much handling. And a very little spice can do the magic. You don't need too much spices. The meat itself is beautiful. It speaks for itself.
Chef Sabi Gori is an important ambassador for Australian produce and brings a kind of Jamie Oliver celebrity factor to the Indian culinary scene. He's rubbed shoulders with our PM and created the sumptuous spread at the Taste of Australia gala function at the High Commission in New Delhi.
So absolutely stunning produce, love it, it's beautiful. We're trying to combine it with Indian spices, trying to curate some Indian recipes with Australian produce. I think that's been the highlight of this year's campaign and the menu curation that I've done.
Ties forged over the dinner table, sometimes the best door into diplomacy.
We're celebrating the fact that Australia and India have a level of strategic alignment that we have never known in our history. We have always been friends, but now we are close strategic partners.
It's been a long time since Australia rode on the sheep's back. But in an era of shifting alliances, vying superpowers and new partnerships, sheep meat exports to the most populous country in the world hold enormous promise for sheep producers and processors.
We see it's going to take time, but we're willing to make the investment and we build a customer base in that period of time.
We have a moment in time that if we don't capture this right now and invest for the long term, we don't want to be looking back in 5 to 10 years' time and wondering, what if? So really, I think the question is, what have we done with other key markets for Australia when they became big? What worked back then? And how do we then apply that to the Indian context as well and ensure that we actually make the strategic investment in coming over?
G'day, I'm Matt Brand. Australia's sugar industry has started this year's crush, with harvesters rolling through crops and sugar mills firing up around Bundaberg and the Atherton tablelands this week. The industry is expecting a crop in Queensland this year of around 29 million tonnes, which is slightly down on last year. Growers say they're feeling positive despite a range of challenges, including several mills not starting up yet because of workers striking for better pay.
Even though there are these couple of issues such as industrial action and the weather, everyone is still very upbeat. The sugar prices, even though they have come off, it's still a very good sugar price.
Sugar prices have been on the slide in 2024, but no doubt a lot of growers locked in forward pricing last year when sugar hit those record highs. Chicago wheat futures fell away this week, despite news that India is on track to start importing wheat for the first time in 6 years. In the domestic market, chickpea prices remain historically high and canola prices in the West are strong and might go higher. Following news this week, the EU is set to impose heavy tariffs on oilseeds from Russia and Belarus. Rabobank's latest winter crop outlook has Aussie farmers planting around 23.5 million hectares this year, which is slightly up on 2023. There is, of course, a lot that can happen between now and harvest, but the bank is forecasting wheat production to rise, but canola and barley production to fall. And as for prices, well, it's forecasting by harvest time, premium wheat at the port will be worth between $360 and $390 per tonne. In Western Australia, grain growers are wrapping up their seeding programs and have received some rain this week, which will hopefully start turning their season around after a very dry start. As that first northwest cloud band was forming this week, the ABC's Mark Bennett caught up with farmers to see how they're feeling about this year's winter crop in the west.
Under lights and under pressure, Barry West is on the final lap.
Probably 100 hectares to go here. So.
After 2 months working night and day to get his family's grain crop in.
Just after Anzac Day, we had 22 mil of rain. We had our canola in. We stuck that in dry. Just about everything was sown this year's been dry. To be honest, it'd be great to have a rain.
Following a long, hot, dry summer and autumn, growers across the grain belt are hoping this week's forecast of a season break will justify the millions of dollars they've invested. The Bureau outlook for winter indicates parts of southern WA are likely to have a 60 to 80% chance of receiving above average rainfall. But crop analysts predict WA's eventual harvest this year will be down.
At the moment, you'd have to say that you'd be very optimistic if we were likely to achieve more than 15 million tonnes of total grain production in Western Australia this year. We're getting to the stage of the season where it's getting quite critical, and for a lot of growers, sort of north of the Great Eastern Highway, they're on edge, because if we miss out on the forecast rain, it's going to be the probability of getting a reasonable return is going to be unlikely.
Across the south, the soil profile is desperately dry after receiving only patchy areas of summer rain.
It was particularly hot and particularly dry, dusty, windy. There is a lot of areas of crop that have been sown dry that haven't germinated.
A tough start that could see less income for rural communities and the state's coffers.
So, there's a little bit around. A bit of a concern up Geraldton Way, very dry up there. They normally get their crops in and growing quite quickly. Those guys are used to putting crops in dry, same as we are, and then wait for a rain, and up it comes and away we go. So yeah, no, I'm still quite confident about the year.
Let's head to the sale yards now. Cattle numbers fell and so did prices this week, but rain is expected to boost confidence and the market next week. The number of cattle in Australian feedlots continues to break records. The latest data shows cattle on feed has gone beyond 1.3 million head for the first time. I spoke to Barb Madden from the Australian Lot Feeders Association for her thoughts on the big news this week that China has lifted its trade ban on 5 large abattoirs and what that could mean for the feedlot sector.
Very positive news this week that those abattoirs have been relisted. Having market access is just obviously a critical part of what we do, and to have that market open up to the feedlot sector is very positive. The meat market is very complex. Who knows exactly what it will mean, but I'm hearing, some of those high-end programs that we do, the Wagyu and Angus, there'll be possibly some avenues for direction into China. But fundamentally, having broader market access for our grain-fed product is a very positive thing, and very excited to have that open up for us this week.
Meanwhile, sheep and lamb numbers fell slightly this week. There was improved money, though, for weight and quality. Just over 31,000 bales on offer in the wool market, which is the smallest offering since June of last year, and it will be smaller again next week. And finally, let's talk about milk. Under the mandatory Dairy Code of Conduct, milk processors have to publish a minimum price by the start of June, and this week Fonterra was the first out of the gates. And it told its suppliers they would be getting a 13% price cut this season, saying that $8 a kilo is a responsible price that reflects a shift in market conditions. It's a price that might have some farmers scratching their heads, though, given the global dairy trade index is the highest it's been in 18 months. And that is the Landline check on prices. Keep it rural.
Hello, I'm Kerry State at Pinaroo in South Australia's Murray Mallee. For the last 3 years, this town has been the subject of a study investigating whether more art and culture can improve the mental health and well-being of an entire community. And next week on Landline, I'll bring you the results.
There's a new star in Australia's commercial fisheries. The Western Rock octopus is now the industry's fastest growing sector. And as Landline's Sean Murphy reports, it's hoped new cuts and cooking methods will help expand the market globally.
The 17-metre natural selection is steaming to a weed bank 7 nautical miles off the coast of Yanship on the northern outskirts of Perth. Skipper Matt Bigg has set pots for the Western Rock octopus. The Western Rock octopus, or Jinda, which means star in the local Noongar dialect, is the fastest growing commercial fishery in Australia.
It's expanded by 400% over the last decade. The fishery here in Western Australia is just growing exponentially at the moment. It's a fantastic operation.
The natural selection is owned by the Fremantle Octopus Company, which dominates the industry with almost half of its trap-based licences. The crew harvests between 50 and 60 tonnes a year, using 800-metre long lines that each carry 25 traps.
How big would that be?
About 1 kilo to 1.2 kilos.
And is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, this is what we're looking for. These premium grade octopus. All his tentacles are intact. They're a good size for chefs, restaurants.
How old would that be?
This one will probably be about 9 months to a year old. So they grow relatively quickly. Their lifespan's about 1 to 1.5 years old.
Octopi are the ocean's great escape artists. They can change colour and shape, and trapping them was the biggest challenge when the fishery was first developed about 20 years ago. When Landline reported on the interim experimental fishery in 2006, they were using an open-ended trigger pot developed by former lobster fisherman Craig Camilleri. His patented trap design is still considered to be the most ethical, environmentally sensitive and sustainable catching method in the world.
It doesn't use bait, it just uses a lure in there, so we've fulfilled our obligation to the fisheries and it can't catch other products or byproducts in the ocean.
The original trap used an LED light to lure octopi looking for shelter. A modified design now dominates the fishery. The patented trigger mechanism still shuts the traps, but now the animals are lured by plastic bait-filled crabs.
About 4 years ago we developed the bait pellets, and it's increased our productivity by nearly 40% since we've introduced the bait into the crab.
What is the bait?
The bait is a pellet that's mainly made of the tuna offal from the tuna farms in South Australia, and it's an MSC accredited bait.
Craig Camilleri and his brother Ross founded the Fremantle Octopus Company in 2001. They're still shareholders, but today it's a public unlisted company with prominent high net worth investors such as the Bunnings family, which founded the hardware empire, and Jack Cowan of Hungry Jack's fame. The company sells 70% of its product raw and is in high demand from restaurants all over the world.
Is that a premium product?
It is. There's certain markets that just want that size of product. The Europeans are used to the larger octopus. At the moment in our fishery, our average size is around 1.2 to 1.3 kilos headless weight.
General Manager Emma Davison oversees an operation where consistency is crucial.
Our raw product is graded by size. So we have medium, large and extra large. What that means is they're getting tentacles only. The tentacles are perfect and they have an average size in each pack. The chef then can create a masterpiece with that having consistency in yield, which is the end cooked product on the plate, and costing of that. The difference from our product to a whole octopus is if you get a whole octopus, you can have one tentacle that's 200 grams and another tentacle that's 100 grams. When the chef cooks that product, if he cooks at the same time, he's going to get different texture profiles, different yields, and a different cost per plate.
At Scottbridge's Bib and Tucker restaurant in Beachside, North Fremantle, the product is a menu staple.
Fremantle Octopus has been on our menu for 11 years now, since day one. We changed our menu seasonally, so this is the end of summer in Perth. So beautiful fresh flavours. We've got a little Japanese salad that sits underneath with burnt cucumber, pickled cucumber and some fresh cucumber, some sesame seeds and a little bit of seaweed. Octopus holds up to a lot of flavours. You really can do many things with octopus. It's a beautiful natural flavour itself, but it actually carries a lot of flavour as well. You know, the old perception of it being rubbery and really tough really is going out the door. It's one of our best-selling dishes on our menu here. People just love it. I mean, it's caught in these waters out here. For us, it's almost like eating pasta in Rome. When you come to the beach in Fremantle, have some octopus.
The Fremantle Octopus Company developed a new cooking method last year and is hopeful that it will grow markets for consumers looking for alternative sustainable protein sources that taste good.
Well, octopus has more iron and more protein than red meat. So a health-conscious person that's wanting to increase their protein content and iron and are concerned about the land-based proteins that are available on the market and are considering an alternative protein, octopus is that alternative protein. It's wild-caught, all natural, it has no impact on the environment like your land-based proteins, so it really is going to be that future protein for people to start selecting.
It's a big one. With innovations such as lead core ropes that sink rather than float in the water column and become potential hazards to migrating whales, the Western Rock is one of only 2 octopus fisheries globally to have independent sustainability certification from the Marine Stewardship Council.
It's really quite unique. By and large, octopus around the world are subject to many challenges. Number one is probably their short-lived nature. Unlike many fin fish, octopus only live for around 18 months, which means they're really hard to manage. Without strong management, there is a risk, and we've seen it in other fisheries that kind of overreach in terms of their catch. But in this fishery, there's really strong harvest strategy, which makes sure that if they see any fluctuations in the catch, that is either kind of justified, either new vessels have entered the fishery or they've expanded into a new range.
The Western Rock octopus fishery now stretches as far north as the Abrolhos Islands off Geraldton and south to Augusta. The MSC says only 13% of the potential fishing ground is being harvested. But that may soon change. The Fisheries Research and Development Corporation is being asked to fund a $650,000 study into expanding the fishery.
In the expansion into the deep water on the west coast and on the south coast as well, because there's a lot of available habitat out there for this fishery to operate in.
The Western Rock octopus fishery is Australia's fastest growing, but could it one day also be one of its biggest?
We have the capability of growing and being larger than the Western Rock lobster industry. So the Western Rock lobster industry is a huge contributor to the economy in Western Australia. At the moment they have around 230 vessels fishing in that fishery. Our fishery is still in early stages. We have 23 vessels currently fishing, and we believe that in 5-10 years' time the fishery will be as big as the Western Rock lobster.
And that's the show for today. We hope you enjoyed it. Now it's time for the winter long-range forecast from the Bureau. From everyone at Landline, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.
Welcome to the Bureau's long-range forecast for winter 2024. First, let's look at recent conditions. Australia's autumn rainfall has been very much below average in the southwest and the southeast. Victoria and Tasmania both look set to have around half the average rainfall for autumn, and South Australia around 40% below average. In contrast, the Northern Territory had almost double its usual rainfall, with most of it falling in March as a result of Tropical Cyclone Megan and an active monsoon trough. April and May were dry for most of the south and west. Most of New South Wales had above average rainfall with persistent showers along the coast in May. Autumn has been warmer than usual for most of Australia. Daytime temperatures were warmest on record on the far west coast during autumn. At the end of May, soil moisture is below average for large areas of southern Australia and part of the northwest. While for the north and east, soil moisture is average to above average. Many of Australia's water storages are high and around 75% full overall at the end of May. Water storages in some areas are falling below last year's levels, including the Murray-Darling Basin North at 66%, the southeast coast around 52%, and the southwest coast at 34%. Looking ahead at the winter forecast, Above average rainfall is likely for some southern central parts of the mainland, parts of the west, and Queensland's North Tropical Coast. Most other areas, including most of the east coast, have no strong signal towards either a wetter or drier winter than usual. This means rainfall is likely to be more typical for the season. While the forecast shows it might be drier in the far north, these areas usually have low rainfall at this time of year. East coast lows and thunderstorms can still happen during winter, bringing dangerous wet and windy weather to the eastern states. Stream flow is likely to be low in the southwest and parts of the southeast. Most sites are likely to have near median to high stream flow for May to July, mainly along the east coast. For areas where soil moisture and water storages are high, this can increase the risk of flooding at times of heavy rainfall. While winter is a time for cooler weather, temperatures are very likely to be higher than usual across Australia. Even with a milder winter, frosts can still occur when temperatures drop below 4 degrees Celsius. Australia's fire agencies advise a normal fire risk across the country this winter. While there are no areas with an increased risk, destructive fires can still occur in the winter months. Widespread warmer than average sea surface temperatures are forecast globally, including in oceans surrounding Australia. The El Niño Southern Oscillation in the Pacific Ocean is currently neutral. There are some signs a La Niña may form later this year, which is why we're at La Niña Watch. However, this does not guarantee a La Niña will develop. In summary, the winter forecast shows rainfall is likely to be typical for the season for large parts of Australia, including a typical seasonal chance of unusually low or high rainfall. Above average rainfall is likely for some parts of the west and some southern central parts of the mainland, and warmer than usual days and nights are very likely everywhere. Visit the Bureau's website to find out more about the long-range forecast. Select your location on the map to see the likelihood of different conditions. Details are in the pop-up charts if you select your location on the map. Bye for now.